And we are fighting 5, 4, a 3, a 2, a 1.
Keep her level. It's your first time up, so don't do anything interesting.
Who, me?
Yeah, you. And remember, she stalls out at about 100. So keep the airspeed up, otherwise you're going to be drifting around all over the sky. And if the ailerons start to shimmy...
Baby, I have flown a plane or two in my life.
Not like this one you have, and this one's a handful. You sneeze in this thing, and you can end up upside down in the bean field.
Okay, right off now. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 226, and our movie this week is 1991's The Rocketeer. And joining me, because they had never seen it before, it's Katra. How you doing?
Hey, Travis in chat room. How are you guys? I'm doing great. This was a surprisingly awesome movie.
Okay, so I gotta know how, because you're a little bit younger than me, but only by a couple of years. So how was it that you just never saw this? Did it just kind of never cross your path, or what, if any, history have you got?
It came out in June of 1991, so I was like 7.5 years old when it came out. Or yes, 7.5. I get my ages. To quote the doctor, I'm so old I forget how old I am.
Right.
But so yeah, no, I just had never seen it before. It literally just never, like, I had heard of it. You know, I can remember seeing the commercials, especially on the Disney Channel, because it is a Disney production and everything.
Yeah.
But just never actively went to go see it.
Okay. And just never got it on home video, never rented it or anything like that?
Yeah, it was just not one of those movies that really... You know how with Let's Watch Highlander, I'll be in the chat room and say, not another Nazi episode?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I was with this one growing up. It's like, not another Nazi movie.
So, okay, I mean, I didn't see this in theaters. 1991 was the summer of TMNT 2, The Secret of the Ooze. That was my movie for that summer. There was a couple of others, I believe, the same year, but this one just sort of, I remember seeing ads for it as a kid. I was right around 9-10 years old, kind of target audience for this movie. Just didn't see it, but I did see it shortly after it came out on home video, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I distinctly remember watching this with my dad, and him and I just kind of getting a kick out of a couple of the one-liners in it and just enjoying it as just kind of a fun movie.
Sure.
So, as you mentioned, debuted June 1991. Now, The Rocketeer is based on a comic book that began in 1982, and it was made specifically in kind of an homage to 30s pulp heroes. So you had the Rocketeer, and the look in the movie is very, like, basically dead on to what the comic book was. There were some tweaks to the jetpack, but overall, they basically just copy and pasted. In fact, I did read that the creator of the comic book, Dan Stevenson, is that his name?
Yeah.
He gave a bunch of his concept art and concept material to the filmmakers when they were making the movie, and they pretty much just went with that. Like they used,
that's what I've been reading too.
which is fascinating to me that they really, because a lot of times when you adapt a comic book, you make several changes, and there were changes made that we will talk about. But
sure,
it's kind of cool how closely they were able to replicate the feel for this. So this movie comes out in 1991. This was during kind of the first sort of comic book movie boom period, because prior to 89, the movies based on comic books effectively were the Superman films, and Howard the Duck. There wasn't much else that were comic book based films. There'd been some series, some TV stuff, but major like motion pictures, it was that. And then Batman 89 comes out and changes everything.
Yep.
And like Hollywood was never the same after that. But Batman 89 was just, you might have been just a little bit too young to fully get the juggernaut that was at the time. But even so, you have to have like remembered just seeing Batman stuff everywhere at that point.
Oh
right?
yeah. Well, especially because I live in Pittsburgh, and the main star was Pittsburgh's own Michael Keaton, as I love to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I mean, and it, literally everywhere. It had action figures and lunch boxes and tie-ins at McDonald's, and just you couldn't escape it. And then, so that's 1989, right? And then 1990, what's the big one? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The live-action film comes out.
Yep.
And the cartoon series is still going strong, and it's just everywhere. It's at Pizza Hut. It's at like every toy store is riddled with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's a video game. There's all of it. So movie studios started being like, okay, that's it. Everything based on comic books. Let's just do it right now. And they were buying up whatever they could, basically. And so the Rocketeer was one that Disney finally said an okay to. Originally, there were plans as far back as like 83, 84 to try and do a live-action movie of the Rocketeer. Stevens wanted to do that fairly soon after. He talked to some people, but it kept stalling out. The initial, the two of the writers that got credit for this, who are, let me find the names here. I scrolled right past them, of course. Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo had actually been approached. They started working on a script. They wanted to do something kind of black and white, very low budget, but they couldn't get a studio to buy in because it was
honestly,
too low budget.
I think that would have worked for this movie too. A black and white movie. I think that totally would have worked.
It could have. I could see it because it was very much inspired by the old like Commander Cody type serials, and those were in black and white back then.
Well, Buck Rogers in the 26th century or whatever it was.
That kind of stuff too.
Influence.
So they kicked around the idea. It ended up not really coming to fruition, but the bones of their script is what sort of became the story for this movie. William Deere had signed on. He was going to direct it. He ended up not being able to because they just sort of drug things out for too long. But Joe Johnston, who had met Stevens when he was working on, I think it was Empire. I think Dave Stevens. So thank you for the correction there. Dave Stevens had come to the set of either Star Wars or Empire and was just checking some stuff out and met Joe Johnston at that point, and they kind of reconnected several years later. Joe Johnston was a big part of the art department at ILM, and he had worked on a lot of the design stuff on things like the Millennium Falcon, like Boba Fett's initial look, all of that kind of stuff. So he definitely had the right background for it, and I think that the two of them kind of connected a little bit.
Sure, and I mean, as far as directing, Joe Johnston had only previously done Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
But here's the thing. So here's Disney with like, all right, we've got this. It eventually got to Disney that they got an option to make the Rocketeer, and they went ahead with it. So they've got this thing sitting there. They're like, okay, we got this comic book property. We're going to do it. And I think that initially when Stevens first talked to him, they wanted to do it under the Touchstone banner because his initial idea was to have it not necessarily like dark and gritty or adult, but he was going for more of a PG-13 feel at the time. And Disney ended up deciding, no, it's going to be more marketable for all the merchandise if we make it PG and we make it a family movie. So they decided to do it under the Disney banner. And then they've got Joe Johnston, who just did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids the year before, which made a boatload of cash. And he has a good style, and so it was it was a good mix. And they decided to go with it. So now it's into casting and all of that. And that is where this movie really shines, is in its casting for me.
Yes, but I can think of one way to make this movie a billion times better, to be honest with you.
Well, before we get to that, I'm gonna give a quick background of what Disney wanted versus what the creators wanted. So Joe Johnston and Dave Stevens wanted an unknown actor to play the role. They didn't want a known face. And Billy Campbell, who was not completely unknown, but in the realm of everyone, he was pretty well unknown. He had starred in a Crime Story series, but for the most part was pretty unknown. But he actually got a haircut to look like the character from the comic, and did an audition, and they loved him. Disney, however, wanted a name. They wanted a face that they could market. Even they wanted somebody who was. You hear things where they talk about like, oh, they wanted an A-lister. Well, they wanted somebody who was at least as well known as Michael Keaton was prior to Batman. They wanted that level or higher.
And so, okay, I'm biased and everything. You know, I'm from Pittsburgh. He's from Pittsburgh, but I think he would have worked in this movie.
But you're not going to cast him in this the year after Batman, like or within a year of Batman. It's just you're not doing that. And they couldn't have afforded him. That would have ballooned the budget, I'm sure. But I don't know that I like Michael Keaton for this role. I'll kind of get to why. But Disney, you know, they trotted in all sorts of people. They were bringing in Kurt Russell. They were bringing in Johnny Depp, as the rumors go. All sorts of names. Johnston and Stevens kept fighting back and saying, no, we want this unknown. We don't want to go with anybody. And they eventually won out and cast Billy Campbell. I personally loved Billy Campbell as Cliff. And it's somewhat surprising to me, and I'm pretty sure it's because this movie did not do well at the box office, that Billy Campbell didn't have more of even a short career kind of starring in a bunch of movies before it fell off. He sort of had this, and then that was it. And he steadily worked, don't get me wrong. He's still working up to today. He's done a lot of television and some series, and he pops up in things here and there. But looking at this movie, his look, his charisma on screen, which I think he actually had, and he had very good chemistry with Jennifer Connelly. I feel like he should have had like a longer arc as that sort of leading man, and he never got that. And I think a lot of it is because the Rocketeer just bombed. It didn't.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. He definitely has that leading actor look too, especially in this movie. I thought he was very handsome. But Travis, I think I'm going to make this movie just a little bit better and appeal to what the writers wanted in an unnamed actor. There was this guy in 1991. He was just starting his acting career. In fact, he had just had a role in 1991's Vietnam and Dogfight. And the following year, he made a movie called Encino Man. I think the leading actor should have been Brendan Fraser.
Fraser, not Frazier.
Well, that's what I thought I said, but yeah.
I always make that joke because there was a promo he did many years ago on, I don't remember. I always think it's MTV, but it might not have been. But he makes the joke of, I'm Brendan Fraser, and that's Fraser. You say Frazier, I know where you live. And like that just stuck with me forever. But I could see him in this role. He could do, because he's got all of those same things. He's got all of that charisma. He's got the look for it. I could see that working. I think he's a touch younger than Billy Campbell, I think. But they're right around that same age. So he could have worked. He definitely had the look and the build to be that guy. And he's got the comedic timing and kind of the charisma that honestly I think Billy Campbell had. So yeah, no, that's a great casting choice too. But I don't think Billy Campbell's a bad casting either.
Oh no! Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Billy Campbell is bad at all. I think he was great in the role. I'm just saying the movie probably could have been just a little bit better with babyface Fraser in. I'm gonna butcher that. Sorry, Brendan. But I think he would have. I mean, I don't know how he would have been with Jennifer Connelly, who was magnificent, by the way. As well.
Oh, she was great.
And I mean, the whole cast was great. And I gotta admit that I've confused Billy Campbell with the guy who played Cupid on Charmed a lot. So
I could see that.
There's that. Yeah, but I mean, and then you see Timothy Dalton, and I'm sitting there like, what's James Bond doing in a movie like this?
Well, now imagine it's 1991 though, and you're watching this. He's just done The Living Daylights and License to Kill. Like he is he is James Bond at this point. This is pre-GoldenEye, and
You're right.
here he is playing the bad guy, and he's so good at it. And
he really is.
This movie right here, by the way, for me, is when I watch it, it is the proto version of what he does as Simon Skinner in Hot Fuzz about 15 years later, where he's just a little bit older, right? He's 15 years older, but he's playing that same. He's just kind of, he takes this Neville Sinclair character and just sort of cranks it up, the over the top factor for Simon Skinner, and it works so well.
Totally.
He's got that ability to have such a slimy delivery, but he does it through that smile where you're just like, but I like him. But he's a Nazi.
I can't find my notebook now, but I totally had written down that Timothy Dalton in 1991 still has it in 2023.
Oh yeah,
because he's still got that sex appeal to him completely.
He does, and he's got that like so this movie being set in the 1930s, 1938, I believe it is.
October 1938.
And him playing the character of Neville Sinclair, which is it's Errol Flynn. That's who he's playing. They're just not using the name Errol Flynn. It's so good because he has that gravitas to him. He has that presence where you could see him in old Hollywood, especially, kind of he's hamming it up a little bit here. He's turning it up just a little bit, and he's perfect at it. And with that little mustache and just that smirk that he has is just perfect.
When he turned to say hi to the small-time actor playing Clark Gable.
Oh, that was great.
That's what I knew. Yeah, Timothy Dalton would have made it perfect in the 1930s Hollywood.
And I loved that Clark Gable and W.C. Fields impersonators that they had. Those were both fantastic. But Dalton is so good in this because it's never hidden that he's a villain. Like basically, after that first scene where he's doing his acting, right? We haven't revealed that he's the bad guy yet, but it's like right after that we get that reveal. So it's never hidden. And he just does such a good job throughout it. But he also gets to have these sort of extra heel turns, extra reveals about his character as you go on. We know he wants the rocket pack, but we don't know why. And then we learn later on why, because he's a spy. He's working for the Germans. And then after... I absolutely love it. It's so dumb, but it's so good at the same time. After like the full reveal of where his allegiances lie, he either adopts or falls back into a German accent.
I noticed
depending
that.
on how you want to look at it. Like he either was putting on the fake English accent as Neville Sinclair, or he's now adopting a German accent. It could go either way. It's kind of a coin flip. I love it because it's so dumb. It has no purpose whatsoever, and it's for like 3 minutes of dialogue. But without it, I think the movie is lesser. Without that silly little detail.
They needed that scene. Now, what I think could have been, honestly, what could have been removed from the movie was the whole who created the rocket pack in the first place.
Oh, you don't like the stuff with Howard Hughes? Because I love that.
I would have liked it better if Disney would have actually ponied up the money and got Doc Savage instead.
I thought that because that's in the comic. It's Doc. It's heavily implied. I don't think they come right out and say it. And Phil Rude in the chat might know because he's read more of the comics than I have. I've only done kind of a cursory glance over them, but it's either heavily implied or stated somewhere that it's Doc Savage that made it, and Disney didn't have the rights for Doc Savage. They weren't going to pay for it. I kind of like changing it to Howard Hughes, and I like that.
I don't.
And I like that because it's giving you a still larger than life comic book type character, but a real person that you could buy. Was like, no, Howard Hughes is crazy enough that he would have tried to do something like this and then thrown it away because he's Howard Hughes and he's just out there.
Well, I think the main problem I had was that Howard Hughes in the movie, at the very least, was a bit of a pacifist. And the real Howard Hughes purposely made a car that could have been retrofitted to be a weapon for the war. And even then, he came off, and of course, this is me in 2023 looking at a movie in 1991. he came off to me as too much like Howard Stark instead of Howard Hughes.
Well, Howard Stark and Tony Stark were based off of Howard Hughes.
Yeah,
That
I'm
was the
aware
inspiration for that. So,
but I just think I don't know. I still think that Disney should have said to Condé Nast, "We'll pay you whatever you want. Let us use Doc Savage, just to get that authentic feel from the comics."
well, okay.
would
So
have
I
been
ask you
much
this
better.
though, especially in 1991, but even today, how many people know who Doc Savage is? If you say the name Doc Savage to your average person, not a comic book fan, not a comic book nerd, but just somebody who's going to a movie, and you have a character in it named Doc Savage, do you think many people are going to know who that is?
I think about the same amount of people that know who Howard Hughes Hugh is.
I can tell you that of acquaintances of mine, family members especially, that are not my dad, because my dad was a comic book reader, almost none of them know who Doc Savage is, but a lot of them, especially older crowds, and those that would have been your sort of older parents and younger grandparents in 1991 know who Howard Hughes was.
Okay, let me put it from my perspective then. I started reading comic books shortly after the Wonder Woman movie came out, and I still knew who Doc Savage was.
Sure, but you dive into stuff at a very different rate than your average person too.
Okay, that's fair. No, that's completely fair. I just didn't like it's not even about the character specifically. I just didn't like the subplot. I didn't care for it. I didn't care who created the rocket pack. The movie was literally guys find it. By the way, Alvin Arkin, he just passed away. He was Alan Arkin. Sorry. He just passed. He was phenomenal in this movie. But it's two men find this rocket. The FBI wants it for the war effort, even though it's 1938 and the United States is still like 3+ years away from entering the war in the first place. And the Nazis wanting it because, well, they're Nazis. That's enough.
Well, but here's the thing. So the FBI doesn't want it for the war effort. The FBI wants it, is trying to keep organized crime from getting it. They don't know right away that the Nazis are after it, but Howard Hughes does. Howard Hughes got that information for them in this movie. He told them about it. They know that the organized crime is involved. That's what the FBI is doing there. I think that it doesn't take anything away for me to have an origin of where did this come from. Now, if you want to say, okay, it could be any random eccentric millionaire, billionaire of the time who created this thing, that's fine. I just kind of liked the sort of nod to, we've got Neville Sinclair, who's a fictionalized character, but he exists in a world with Clark Gable and W.C. Fields. So now we've got the FBI and Howard Hughes, who is played by Terry O'Quinn, and I love Terry O'Quinn. And he was good. He's having a great time in this. He's got a couple great one-liners, and I just think that like having that aspect of it, because they didn't overplay that either. It was very short scenes. We basically had the FBI go back to him, and he's like, well, we got to find this thing because we got to keep it out of, we got to figure out who wants it, but we got to get it back. And then they sort of they have to go to Cliff because they got to get to Cliff and be like, all right, dude, you're hiding this thing, we know, but here's the reason why we're after you for it. We need to get that back and keep it out of the wrong hands. It didn't bother me to have that subplot because there wasn't too much of it. Our main focus was Cliff and Neville and Jenny.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm saying you could have removed it and the movie still would have worked, but sure. I agree. I'm not saying that you needed to remove it or that it was a big bother to me. Like, it still worked, like you said. I'm just saying you could have removed it completely and the movie still would have worked on its face. That's all.
True, but I mean, by the same token, you could remove the character of Bigelow completely from the movie and it doesn't change anything, but I don't want to lose John Polito in this movie.
Oh,
for the few precious moments he's on screen, John Polito is just, because I mentioned how Timothy Dalton has this way of being incredibly charming while he's being just a terrible guy. And this and Simon Skinner are perfect for that. John Polito has this ability to just be greasy, is the only way I can describe it. Like, almost every movie I see him in, he is so good at portraying this kind of just sneaky or underhanded or you don't quite trust him kind of guy, whether it's like actually nefarious or just sort of like selfish and greedy. But he just...
I'm going to give you a hint why he plays that character so well.
Okay.
He's from Philadelphia.
I mean, hey, it works.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
he just always feels like he has a film over him, right? There's just like this greasy film over his character at all times.
Sure. And you know what? At the same time, the type of character he plays, that greasy character, is still endearing.
Oh, yeah. Because in this case, he's just greedy. And he's just like, no, I'm going to get my money. And so the comedy moments of him being like, don't worry. It's all part of the show. And then they cut away and they come back to him later. And he's like, it's all part of the show, as his second fuel truck has exploded on his airfield. Unfortunately, and then on top of that, as much of a douche as he was to Cliff and Peavy, he didn't deserve to go out the way he did. Like,
no, he really didn't.
Poor guy got folded like a taco.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just, ugh. And which by the way is pretty gruesome for a Disney PG film.
Sure, I was sitting there thinking exactly that. I was like, that's pretty dark. But just speaking of the actors in general, there were a lot of actors in this movie, aside from like Jennifer Connelly, Billy Campbell, Alan Arkin, and everything. There were a lot of actors in this movie that you could just recognize from anything in that time period and today. Oh yeah, great character actors in here. I mean, Paul Sorvino is Eddie Valentine. Oh, perfect. Which originally, supposedly, the rumor is that the role was originally offered to Joe Pesci and he turned it down. That's what I've read, yeah. I could see Pesci doing that, but I love Paul Sorvino, and I think he fits the tone of this movie more. I think he honestly did. If you are doing a PG-13 to R-rated Rocketeer where it's a little grittier, Pesci might fit a little bit better because Pesci has this boiling anger that's always there that Sorvino can do. Sorvino can be very imposing, but he also can be sort of like a wholesomely imposing, if that makes any sense at all. Like, seeing him in Law and Order, it absolutely does. So he fits this so well, and I absolutely loved Paul Sorvino in everything. It didn't matter what he was in. But you're right. There were so many good character actors in this. I mean, Ed Lauter as Fitch is one of those character actors that he pops up in something and just makes me smile. And like in this, he's the FBI agent that is firmly rooted in the 30s and using that 30s lingo. And yes. It sounds so ridiculous, and I love, like, what is it? Your buddy's being fit for a pine overcoat. Yeah, I think is something that he says. I'm pretty sure I think that was one of them. And yeah, no, that's what I mean. There were so many, and it's like the FBI agents, the mobsters, they all felt right out of the 1930s. It was perfect. Tell me that the character played by Robert Miranda, named Spanish Johnny, who was sort of like Sorvino's second in command. Tell me he didn't look like a Xerox copy of Robert De Niro. He does. I'm looking at a picture of him right now. He totally does. Like he's like if somebody described you Robert De Niro from memory and then drew it, you would get sort of a Robert Miranda in this movie. Yes. And then like the characters of Malcolm, Skeets, and Goose, the three on the were Eddie Jones, William Sanderson, and Don Pugsley. Eddie Jones was in Lois and Clark: New Adventures of Superman. He was John Kent. Oh. And he's character actor in a bunch of other stuff. And William Sanderson, who is the one that I always remember from Blade Runner, he was J.F. Sebastian. And those two are great. And you're right. It's just like all these character actors. Freaking what was my note? Shoot, I lost it. Oh, the singer
in the South Seas Club?
Right.
Melora Hardin. If you've ever watched The Office, you know that. You've seen her face before.
Right.
She's been in a bunch of stuff. And who was the other one that it like made me do a double take?
Well, Hardin was also in Dirty Dancing.
Yes.
So the TV series, I mean, by the way. Just so no one gets confused.
One of the FBI agents was played by the guy who was the second person to play the Shape in the Halloween series, Dick Warlock.
Oh wow! Huh. Yeah, we'll talk about that after all this.
He was one of the background FBI agents. Where is it? Howard. Clint Howard. Clint Howard has a blink and you'll miss it cameo. That if you're not paying attention, did you even notice Clint Howard in the movie?
I've watched this thing 3 times since I rented it on Amazon, and no, I didn't notice Clint Howard. Oh my gosh!
I did not realize it until this most recent watch through, and he is the person at the South Seas Club that comes up to Neville Sinclair, leans down and tells him, like whisper something to him, and then he gets up to leave. It's Clint freaking Howard.
Oh my goodness!
I was like, how do you get Clint Howard? He doesn't even look up towards the camera. I just happened to catch like the top of his bald head and a little bit of his. He looked up just enough that I could see his face. I'm like, holy crap! Like, it's cracked me up.
Apparently, his character has an actual name in the movie too. It's Mark.
Yeah, which okay, they never said it, but sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They never said it. It was like you said, blink and you miss it. He's gone, and they give him a name.
I love when movies do that. And then there are other movies where somebody will have speaking lines, and they'll be like, "Man in car." It's like, okay,
right.
And Tiny Ron, by the way, as Lothar. I love Lothar in this. He was modeled after the facial prosthetics that he wore were modeled after an actual actor from like the 40s who played sort of those big goons, even though the guy that they modeled him after was like 5'9", and Tiny Ron is he's like 6'7", I think, something like that, like just big. And they obviously make him look even bigger in this movie. Weird thing, I watched this. I watched this a couple of years ago when Disney Plus first launched. I remember being like, "The Rocketeer, I haven't seen this in a decade or two," and I watched it. And for some reason, like the next night, I had a weird dream in which somebody in my dream was stalking me that looked exactly like Lothar from this movie, except their face was coal black.
Ooh.
And it was a very odd, like for some reason I can't remember any other dreams from the last like 3 years really, but for some reason that imagery is burned into my brain of like long hair and that face, but black like charcoal. And so yeah, when I watched it this time around, I had a couple of flashbacks for a second. It was a little weird, but
yeah, wow. I mean, Tiny was intimidating even to me, that's for sure.
Well, and he's intimidating even out of makeup. He does have one quick cameo shot in this out of makeup when he's flying through the cornfield, and then they cut to the two kind of rednecks, and the one says, "Oh, that's a big gopher." The bigger one of those two rednecks is Tiny Ron.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I remember that scene, and I remember seeing him.
And he also had a part in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. And I think the reason in that, I remember thinking that the goon he was playing was big, but he's standing next to Dan Marino, who's already like 6'4", 6'5". So he doesn't look... It's not like it's not like Tiny Ron standing around normal Hollywood types where he just literally towers over all of them. Like, so I always forget just how big that guy is. But like Lothar was such a weird character because he's sort of... Like, he's this big, imposing guy. He's sort of indestructible, but yet, I don't know. There's something about him that's just strange. It's kind of one of those characters, like, I want to know more, but I also sort of like the mystery of just like, okay, Neville Sinclair just has this guy on speed dial. You can just call him up and be like, "Lothar, sick him." And he's just like a trained dog, goes after whatever Sinclair points him at.
Well, that goes back to the whole comic books thing too.
Yeah,
So they
that's
always
true.
had that big lurching guy that main villains. So, and I was actually going to say, as far as it being a comic book and a comic book movie, this is exactly the type of origin movies I wanted for Batman, Superman, even Wonder Woman. We can't say the Flash or Green Lantern or any of them because they came in the 50s. But I want an origin movie that takes those three and goes back to this era in the style of the Rocketeer.
Okay, so here's a question for you. So
Sure.
this movie is a Disney movie. It's PG. It was marketed as a family movie. It's very much a family movie, which I have no problem with whatsoever. I think it's great to have that. We don't have enough of this type of movie, which is family friendly, but also fun. Like, I can watch it as an adult and it doesn't feel like it's pandering or talking down at all, like a lot of family friendly stuff can at times.
Sure.
Do you think, had they gone the Touchstone route and made it a PG-13 film, that it would have done better in the box office or not?
Better in the box office, yes. Better as a just pick it up and watch it movie, no.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would have aged the same way or not. It's hard to say because how far do you go? The comic, Phil mentioned that the comic isn't really that adult. It's very pulpy comic book, but it is a little bit more like
sexier.
Yeah, in the comic, the character of Jenny is named Betty Page, and she's a pinup girl. Basically, Betty Page. They changed it for the movie because Betty Page said, "No, you're not using my name," and they changed her from a pinup girl to an actress. But I mean, small changes like that, which I think is fine. I don't have a problem with a change like that. It doesn't fundamentally change the character in my mind.
No.
And we haven't really talked about Jennifer Connelly yet, but I want to get to her. But I kind of want to follow through on this thought. Is like, it all depends on how PG-13 you go with it, how it ages, versus the PG kind of more family friendly. Because I think PG-13 maybe gives you a little more character leeway to do a bit more, but at the same time, this is just sort of a fun adventure-y movie, so you don't need deep characters.
I think for PG-13, the mob would have been able to get away with like a lot more swearing. Definitely a lot more nudity. Because I looked up what PG-13 means. Because I've never actually known what PG-13, like what the rules are. And it just says that it may go beyond PG rating in theme, violence, nudity, sensuality, language, adult activities, or other elements, so long as it doesn't get into the R. So I think the Mafia and the Nazis definitely could have had more if they had gone to PG-13.
And basically, here's what I see as being different if they go PG-13 versus PG. And all of it is very subjective because it's basically whatever the MPAA decides on that given day. Right, and they don't tell you what it is. That's why, famously Kevin Smith would get Dogma back, and they'd say it's X-rated. He's like, or NC-17. He's like, okay, well, it's too violent. All the violence is off screen, but sure, whatever. And you have to change things and go there. So, one thing that would change if this is PG-13 versus PG is the gunfight at the end of the movie, which already is, it's a pretty expansive gunfight between the mob and the FBI and the Nazis.
Yeah.
There would be, instead of it just being wildly firing Tommy guns towards each other, there would actually be shots of people getting hit. I think I saw one person actually like go down from a gunshot during the entirety of that fight. It was just sort of blanks firing from both sides. I think PG-13, you see some more people go down. I think that you see in a PG-13, nudity is one that is really hard, right? Because that is so very much of like, I mean...
Well, okay, if it went PG-13...
Go ahead.
That scene with Timothy Dalton and Jennifer Connelly would have been... at first I'm surprised that they let Timothy Dalton's character use chloroform on Jennifer Connelly's character to get her back to his. I mean, it's a Disney movie. What the heck, Disney? What the heck?
Well,
but in a PG-13 movie, that scene would have been a little more gratuitous in the basically spelling out that he's trying to rape her.
in some ways, and really what he's trying to do there is he's just trying to seduce her to get the information that he wants. He's not. I don't think at any point was his character going to cross the line, but he's going to do everything up until that to get the info that he wants.
I certainly hoped that he wouldn't cross the line. I mean, admittedly, I fast forwarded through that particular scene because it started squeaking me out. And seriously, the entire time I'm sitting there, what the heck, Disney? What the heck?
Well, and
this is creepy. What
but
the heck?
here's what makes that scene work in retrospect, though, is that from the moment that Jenny runs into Neville in the club, as she's trying to get away. By this point, she believes Cliff, and she runs into Neville, and then he chloroforms her. From that moment forward, she no longer trusts him, and so she goes through what she's going through with him, as he thinks he's got the upper hand on her. He thinks he's got her still kind of wrapped around his finger, and going to get her to do what he wants and eventually get the information that he's going for out of her. And she ain't buying it. And one of my notes was straight up, she's not buying his bull. But she plays him. And that's why we get that great line of hers, which is like, I finally got to play a scene with Neville Sinclair.
Oh, I loved that. I saw what she was doing, and it was my note was, yay, girl power.
Well, and that's just it. Like, she's not just a damsel in distress, but for most of the movie, she's set up to sort of be that because, again, it's not her story, but I'm glad they didn't just make her like some, arm candy or damsel in distress for it. Yes, Cliff wants to rescue her, but she clearly can handle herself up until a point. She's not going to overpower Lothar. That's just, unfortunately, Neville Sinclair's got Lothar. So that's sort of his trump card. But it's one of those where that scene, I can see it, and I could see it in a PG-13 wanting to go a little bit further, but I don't think it would ever go too much further than what it did because that wasn't the character Sinclair, and that wasn't his goal. He didn't have this like thing where he saw her purely as a way to get the rocket pack, and that's it. He was singularly focused on that rocket. And he didn't care about anything else. He was just going to use whatever he had at his disposal to get that information out of her to find Cliff.
That scene in general was still, like I said, I had to fast forward to it because I started getting sick, physically sick over it. Just because I think they took that particular scene, and that's actually a credit to Timothy Dalton because he came off as a total creep.
Oh yeah, well,
like
and
he was the exact opposite of James Bond there.
He was James Bond there, but he was James Bond from a different point of view. He was James Bond from this isn't consensual point of view, and I can see that as being difficult to watch, but I think that, again, as you said, is a credit to Timothy Dalton, and it's sort of what I was talking about earlier, where he can be incredibly charming, but sleazy with it too. And like his reciting of his lines, and you know that Neville Sinclair, the character, has used those exact moments to seduce women before, where he's said the lines from his movies and they've just fawned over him. Unfortunately, he ran into the Neville Sinclair superfan who knows every line from every movie he ever did and can recall them. And on top of, so you add that layer onto the fact that she no longer trusts him, and now she's hearing this line and her brain is like, hey, I know what that's from. I know what this guy's doing. Yeah. It's great. That's such a great character moment for her.
It was. It really was.
Yeah,
I liked her. Since we wanted to talk about her in the first place, I loved her in this movie.
No, she's great.
She was great. The character was great.
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer Connelly is a fantastic actor, and she has been since she was 16 and doing Legend. You know, here she is, 21 years old, doing this movie, and she not only that, But is there an actress at that time that fit the 30s Hollywood aesthetic better than
If it
Jennifer
wasn't
Connelly?
if it wasn't for Batman, I would have said Michelle Pfeiffer.
I mean,
Maybe Nicole Kidman.
Kidman perhaps, but there's something with Jennifer Connelly because there was this movie, and then about 6 or 7 years later when she did Dark City, which had a similar aesthetic to it, especially for her character, where she's the lounge singer. She just had that look. There's something with the dark hair, her eyes, just the way she
totally.
can fit a dress of that era too. I don't know. She just she looks like she was plucked out of the 30s Hollywood into 1991 for this movie. And then you add in the layers of like, she's not just like, she loves Cliff, and she loves him for the reasons that make sense. Like, yeah, he's kind of a doofus, and yeah, he forgets stuff sometimes, but then he's a sweet guy, and nothing he does is ever like, Cliff never does anything malicious towards her. He's just like,
No.
He's a little wrapped up in what he's doing and forgets sometimes. Yeah. But she doesn't hold that against him. And so when he finally tells her, like, she holds him accountable.
Okay,
but she doesn't hold it against him. There's a difference, and it's very distinct, and it's a very important difference. Like, she wants him to be better. She wants him to get better about it. But she's not going to completely bust his chops just because he forgot something, because he does try to make it up to her. And we don't get that fake, like, forced drama of she's not going to believe him because of the one instance that happened earlier where he didn't tell her about what happened with the plane, so now she's not going to listen to him about anything. No, when he tells her, like, look, something's going on, this is important, and the look he gives her when he says, if anything happened to you, I'd just go completely mad, she knows he means it, and she knows this is important, and she's going to believe him because he wouldn't lie to her about that type of thing. Like, that's where that connection, and their chemistry was real because they got engaged and were together for 5 years after this movie. So, like, the chemistry they had on screen was pretty good.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I did love her. She was very much for especially for 1991. She was very much a powerful female in this movie, which is actually another shocker, considering it's Disney and it's 1991, and she wouldn't have a role like that again for, you know what? I don't even know what she was in after it. I know the Hulk as Betty Ross in 2003, but I never really followed her career after that, or before that, rather.
Yeah, I mean, she had done, like I said, Dark City was 1998. I loved her in that. I thought that's a criminally underrated, underseen sci-fi movie, because it came out the year before The Matrix, but it's not an action sci-fi. It's more cerebral sci-fi. So it's one of those that's just, it can be kind of tough to follow. If you ever do watch it, watch the director's cut, because the director's cut is a better, it sort of has the Blade Runner problem of the original theatrical cut had this voiceover that kind of ruins a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
and
I find that with a lot of movies.
There's more subtlety in the director's cut. It's a little bit longer, but they set things up better. But she had done, I mean, after this movie, she did, let's see, Higher Learning, Out There, Mulholland Falls, she's pretty good in. Then Dark City, before her big breakout for a lot of people, is the movie that is kind of a watch it once, never want to watch it again, Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah, I've heard of that one at least.
But she was also in Pollock. She was in A Beautiful Mind. All of this was before Hulk.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she went on to have quite the career based off of this. But to think that she's only 20 years old in this. And
yeah,
it's the way she carries herself. She carries herself in this movie as somebody who is in their mid to late 20s, you know, 4, 5, 6 years older than she really is. Because the difference between like 2021 and 28, 29 that's a big difference in sort of like your development and maturity and who you are as a person. And you could tell me that she was 27, 28, 29 years old in this movie, and I would 100% believe it.
Honestly, that's why when they were showing the making of the movie within the movie and she was fumbling and everything else, I couldn't believe it. That was the only unbelievable part of her entire acting in this movie, was that she would fumble her lines or she would mess this up. I couldn't believe that, because the character herself plus the actress just had this. I'm trying to think of an actress that she would be. Oh, I just had it in my head. She was in the third Thor movie. Oh my gosh, I'm pulling a Scott Johnson here. Someone help me out,
Thor
please.
movie. You're not thinking Natalie
Ragnarok.
Portman.
No, but sorta. No, the villainess, Hela.
Oh, Kate Blanchett?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, there's a little there. Yeah, I could see that.
But I mean, well, Natalie Portman too. I mean, Natalie Portman is phenomenal, but no, I was thinking Kate Blanchett, totally.
So I mentioned how this movie was a kind of a box office bomb, and it's unfortunate. It was somewhere in $35 to $40 million in budget, which I have lamented that there aren't kind of these mid-budget action movies being made in theaters anymore. They're still happening, but the mid and low-budget action movies kind of go direct to streamers, direct to video. That's sort of the world that they've ended up living in. The one I can think of in the last, say, 10 years is like John Wick was that, right? John Wick is that mid-tier action film that got a theatrical release that did something. And obviously went on to have 3 sequels. But, you know, the movie was that $35 to $40 million budget. It did balloon a little bit from the initial, I think, $25 million, because one of the things they had to do was rebuild the Zeppelin at the end. Because they made that miniature, and then the guy making it was like, you might want to get a second one of these made in case something goes wrong with the first one. And the producer's like, no, we don't have that in the budget. And then, sure enough, something went wrong with the first take, and they had to pay to have another one built.
Sure.
But it had the unfortunate opening weekend against Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And
Terminator 2.
Like, in name recognition alone, Robin Hood is going to beat out the Rocketeer in 1991. Just hands down.
Sure.
Kevin Costner is a much more bankable star in 1991. So I can understand, like, from Disney's aspect and the producer's side of things, I understand them wanting a name to put in this movie. But I don't even think if you had Kurt Russell as the Rocketeer, I'm just throwing a name out, that was one of the names I saw, or Johnny Depp, I don't think that helps it at all, right? Because I don't think having that name, I don't think it does enough to push it over. The kids crowd in 1991 is going to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Secret of the Ooze.
Totally. That's what I went to go see.
That's the movie that's going to draw that crowd. So if you have kids that were my age, your age at that time, we all wanted to see TMNT too. And
or Hook.
We didn't
was out
know
at the same time.
Right. We didn't know the Rocketeer. It wasn't a thing we knew.
No.
But TMNT was. Hook was something we knew with Peter Pan. Robin Hood was something I was super into when I was that age.
Yeah.
And so those were, and that's the bummer of it, is it opened up to like just under $10 million opening weekend, which isn't terrible. And unfortunately, I think Robin Hood made like 18 million and went on to gross 400 million worldwide. This movie did like 46 something, just under 50, which definitely didn't turn a profit based on probably how much they spent on marketing either. So it's a bummer because they could have gone more places with this.
Well, I know that there's one I'm reading here on TV Tropes that apparently Dave Stevenson's plan for the third story arc in the comic and possibly a movie, Cliff would have met a character who was, quote, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, and able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. So basically, Cliff would have met Superman, and they would have been in the same universe.
And there was even joke a couple of years ago when What If was being made that they wanted to have Cliff cross over into What If.
That would have been great.
And somebody the rumor that I heard was that somebody even did like a concept drawing of it with him and Captain America and I think Agent Carter. And Feige was like, no. I mean, it's cool looking art, but no. But it would have been kind of cool to see because he's effectively a superhero. It's a superhero comic book without superpowers.
He is a superhero. Yeah.
And I know we talked. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, back in the 1930s, they would have been known as masked men. It wasn't until Superman, Batman came around that they would have been called superheroes. He was most definitely a masked man. I mean, literally and figuratively, in that he literally went up against the FBI, the mob, and Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
How much more superhero than that does he get?
Oh, I know.
So,
no, he totally is.
So the Rocketeer is most definitely, I would argue, the first superhero myself. And that's why I'm saying I legitimately want Disney, Marvel, whoever, DC, for the love of God, James Gunn, please hear this. If you're going to make movies and you're going to start with their origins, because let's face it, every 4 to 5 years we get superhero origins now when we don't need them anymore. Go back and make them literally, like, okay, Wonder Woman was great. The only problem I really had was they moved her from World War II to World War I. But the fact that they brought her in and she didn't really, like, they had her origin in World War I, and then at the end of the movie, she's in the modern era, and Bruce Wayne figures out who she is and everything. That was great. Do that and this and everything for Batman and Superman. Go back to his George Reeve origins, where he leaps instead of flies.
I need another Batman origin story. Like I need another hole in my head. Like I don't need that anymore. But now you said something real quick. I just want to get clarification on this. You said you think of the Rocketeer as the first superhero. You mean by how do you mean that?
Well, in comic book standards, the comics came out a year before I was born, but they're set in the 1930s. So from that perspective, the Rocketeer is literally, because most of the superheroes we know today came out like Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman came out in what they called the Golden Age of comics.
Well, that was still right around this era. Batman would have been 38. Sure. Superman,
same sunset,
a year earlier.
Okay, so technically a year later, 1930. Or Batman was 1939, Superman was 1938, Wonder Woman was 1942. Okay. So the Rocketeer literally would have been there with Superman, probably a little sooner than Superman, actually, if the comics and everything were made in the 1930s. The setting, in my opinion, sets up Superman.
Yeah, Phil, by the way, brings up a good point in the chat. And if you're going by perspective of when the stories are set, Zorro would have been a superhero before all of them. So,
sure, absolutely. But we're not talking about Zorro right now, Phil. We're talking about the Rocketeer. So let me make my point. So from that perspective, to me, the Rocketeer, I understand Zorro and everything, but talking specifically about the Rocketeer, he would have been America's first superhero. Because, I mean, he was already in the news as a Rocketeer, already had the secret identity. No one knew who he was, well, except the FBI, Mafia, and all that. No one knew who he was. He could literally go city to city. Anywhere that there was a plane race or whatever that was. I think it was just an aerial show. But he could have gone wherever there's an aerial show, fought crime, stopped these Nazis, stopped the mob, and I think it would have been a great. I mean, I haven't read the comics, so I can't talk about the comics specifically. But I think that would have made a great TV show, for example.
It could have been interesting. The funny thing with the movie is that the movie version of Cliff is a very reluctant hero. He actually figures out pretty early on, I don't have skills for this kind of stuff. I need to give this thing back. Like, he doesn't want it. He is willing to turn it in to the FBI, and then he's forced to use it again to help save people that matter to him. So
realistically, don't most comic book heroes start off as reluctant heroes?
There is that, which is why it could be an interesting character study. But you have to have the right motivation for him to actually take on this role of the Rocketeer and not try to give it to somebody who maybe has more skill in that, because he's not, his background is as a pilot. So it was just interesting.
Even then, it doesn't necessarily have to be Cliff that's the Rocketeer. It could be a name that someone just adopts.
Yeah, in fact, there was rumor, because there have been rumors of a sequel for a while. In fact, initially, a couple of the people that signed on to make this movie signed for a potential trilogy, but because it didn't do well at the box office, that never happened.
Right.
They talked about doing a sequel for a long time. There was a point within the last 5 to 10 years where they were going to have a reimagining of it with a former Tuskegee airman who had found the backpack. And that was an interesting idea. It just never took off for some reason.
I can tell you, though, that there is a Disney Junior series.
I have seen that there is that. I have no idea what it's
I have
like
watched it.
Okay.
I have watched it. It's not horrible. It pretty much just follows his grandson.
Okay.
Around. Like, Billy Campbell actually voices Cliff in the series.
Oh, nice. Well, that's good they brought him back for that.
Yeah, and Frank Welker is in it, and Maurice LaMarche is in it, and Charlie Adler's in it. It's not a bad series. It's at least faithful to the Rocketeer as imagined by Disneyverse.
Also, let's be real. If you're doing something animated, there's a hat of names that you have to pick like 7 of them. And those names are Maurice LaMarche, Phil LaMarr, Charlie Adler, Frank Welker, D. Bradley Baker. Like, it's contractual obligation. If you're making something animated, some of those names are going to appear. You just don't.
Absolutely.
You have no choice.
I've gotten to meet Charlie Adler, actually.
Billy West is another one that shows up in a lot of that stuff. Billy West is great.
I
dig that. I mean, it's Disney Junior, right? So it's obviously aimed at a specific audience, but as long as
my nephew,
as long as there's nothing wrong with stuff that's aimed at kids. I mean, some of that stuff can be entertaining. I don't have kids, so I don't really have an excuse to watch it, but
whereas I have an 8-year-old nephew in the house, so I'm stuck watching Bluey and Spider-Man and the cartoon versions and all those little kids cartoons.
I don't know. From what I hear, I don't know if I'm emotionally prepared to watch Bluey. I hear from friends that are parents and friends that are grandparents that are telling me about it, and I'm like, I don't know if I could handle that. I might cry too much watching Bluey.
You would cry, but honestly, you would also laugh.
Yeah,
because they purposely make their dad angry, and it's hilarious to watch. But yeah, moving on. There was at the end of the movie, Eddie Valentine, Paul Sorvino's character, he switches sides. Spoiler alert for a 32-year-old movie.
Yeah.
He switches sides, and Timothy Dalton's character says a line, and he says something like, I may make illegal money, but at least it's American money or something. And to me, to tie it back into the whole superhero thing, it reminds me of the time Marvel and DC did a crossover in 1997 with the Joker siding with the Red Skull. And at the end of the comic, the Joker finds out that the Red Skull is a Nazi, which, even for a lunatic, that should have been common sense. And the Red Skull's like, what are you doing? Why are you switching sides? Blah, blah, blah. And the Joker says, I may be a criminal lunatic, but I'm an American criminal lunatic. And that actually ties into real life.
Yeah, that quite honestly is real. The mob did not. The mob didn't play with Nazis.
Like I'm part Italian on both sides of my family, and I can tell you and I've had those types of connections, and that's the most I'll say. I know family, and they did not like Mussolini at all.
No,
mostly because he went after Sicilian families, but they did not like Mussolini, and Jewish mobsters did not like Adolf Hitler at all. So the greatest single ally, the FBI, I can't either, but so the single greatest ally the FBI and law enforcement had during World War II, surprisingly, was the mafia.
Yep. Yeah, which was a nice, that was something that as a 10-year-old, when I saw this for the first time, didn't register with me. But then when I came back and watched it later on, I'm like, that's a nice, just a nice added little bit of detail to have.
See,
here's Eddie Valentine, and he's just like, he's a mobster and all this, but then he finds out that that Neville Sinclair, who he's working for, is in league with the Nazis, and he's like, No, homie, don't play that. I am not involved with Nazis. And flip sides, and then we get the mob and the FBI in a Tommy gun shootout with a bunch of German soldiers.
That was the greatest. That was the greatest part for me. The whole ending was great. Just how Timothy Dalton's character landed on the Hollywood land sign. There's actually a historical. That's actually kind of a historical reference, in that originally the Hollywood sign was meant to be for the Hollywood land housing development.
Yeah, they actually took it down. They took down the land part. What, 40 something.
Something like that. But what happened was it got destroyed or something. Well, what ended up happening was the sign actually did get destroyed in real life, and the executives of all the movie theater studios and everything actually paid the Los Angeles. Well, the Hollywood land also got absorbed in the city of Los Angeles at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So the movie studios paid the LAPD to rebuild the sign and stipulated in the contract that it could not say Hollywood land.
They didn't want it to be associated with the housing anymore. They just wanted it to be a Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I love it. That was great. What I loved at the end of the movie was when they're in the diner and they're reading the newspaper, and Peavy just happens to read the article about Neville's death. That was a nice car.
Yeah, again, we didn't say enough about how good Alan Arkin was in this movie, because he was phenomenal. Great. He just became that character of Peavy, and he was so good throughout it. One thing I gotta mention this, because we haven't talked about it at all, but 1991. The visuals for this movie, good, not great. They've done stuff better since, like, we have improved our blue screen, green screen technology, so that composites look a little bit better. But overall, this movie still looks very good for what they were trying to do. Because really, if you think about it, this is sort of doing Superman the movie all over again, where you have to convince people that this guy can fly with just a rocket strapped to his back and a rudder that's on his helmet. And they did a very good job with that. And part of it is because they did a lot of miniatures, and they had a miniature Rocketeer, and they did some stop motion for some of the aerial stunts that they just weren't going to be able to pull off with a rig or wires or anything like that. And I think that's kind of fascinating that they did that, because I defy you to find where the stop motion is. Most of it you're not going to notice.
No. On Amazon, for whatever reason, it said that my computer, like I run a Mac Mini M1, it said that it could run everything in HDMI and everything, and yet I still had standard def, but it still looked phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it looks really good. I think overall, there's part, like, you can obviously tell the stuff inside the South Seas Club. He's on a rig, the way he's moving around the room. But that's fine. I don't mind that, because it's sort of what I expect. That's what I expect this type of movie to look like. But a lot of the stuff that was outdoors, where they do the stop motion and they would do the blue screen and the like, it just, for 1991, it looks great. And I'd really love to see it done today, with the technology that we have today, and the fact that films have been swinging back to practical effects with extending and enhancing instead of doing fully CG everything.
Sure.
I'd be curious to see how that would go and how they would do that now, because obviously you'd be able to get the fidelity up, but I wouldn't want to lose some of the charm that this had.
I guess my question for you to touch on that and to sort of talk about that, doing Rocketeer today, I guess it's my turn to turn the questions on you.
Sure.
I guess I would ask, who would you cast as Cliff?
Oh, who would I cast as Cliff? I mean, I like the idea of it being kind of a no-name, so that makes it tough.
Well, not even necessarily a no name, maybe just a lesser name. Like, I would automatically rule out, like, Keanu Reeves.
Well, no, he's too old anyway.
Well, I mean, besides that, maybe he could be this era's Peavy.
PV for me, I don't think Keanu Reeves fits a PV. PV needs to be... Keanu's a little too relaxed, too laid back, too sort of... I almost want to say hippie-ish, but like, you know, just kind of like go with the flow. He doesn't really fit PV for me.
No. Robert Downey Jr. would absolutely have to be Howard Hughes.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're going to cast Howard Hughes, that's a pretty good one to do. Or you could get Leo to do it again. Because he's already played Howard Hughes once.
I'd rather have Robert Downey Jr. If you want, you could if you really want that crossover, you could even make it Tony Stark or Howard Stark. If you're going to set it in the 1930s.
If Disney was doing it today, they would make it Howard Stark for sure. They would somehow plant him in the MCU ancillary.
Gary Oldman is PV.
Okay, I like where your head's at there. I can see that.
As soon as I
can see Gary Oldman being PV.
And if you couldn't get...
He's got that energy.
Yeah, and if you couldn't get Robert Downey Jr. as Howard Hughes, Johnny Depp.
Perhaps. I could actually see Johnny Depp being Eddie Valentine.
Yes.
Because he could have a lot of fun with playing Eddie Valentine. Because he wouldn't... You don't just want somebody to do it the same way that they did it in this movie, right? So Johnny Depp is going to play an Eddie Valentine that's very different from Paul Sorvino's.
How about Keanu Reeves as Neville Sinclair?
See, now there's one that you would not see. You would not picture him playing the bad guy, right? Because Keanu Reeves is just such a good person.
See?
That could maybe work. I'm still stuck on who I think could play Cliff.
That's because then you also got to cast Jenny, and then I guess the question is, do you do Jenny or do you finally just pony up and do Betty Page? Because she was literally based on Betty Page, because that's who Dave Stevenson was dating at the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you do as Betty or Jenny. I think you can kind of go either way on that, because I don't think it's as important. In fact, in some ways, I think it's a little distracting to have her named Betty Page.
True. Yeah, true. Because then you're expecting her to be more like the pinup.
Because it's one thing if you have a side character that's in like 2 scenes, that's Howard Hughes, right? An actual person that was alive. That's one thing. But when your female lead in the film is playing a character named Betty Page, that's going to distract from the rest of kind of what's going on. Yeah. You know, the first name that popped into my head when you asked, I don't know that I like it, but it was just the name that popped into my head, was Chalamet. And I don't know why, but something about him feels like it would fit this kind of not quite superhero, but then at the same time could sort of pull off being a little superhero-ish. I don't know that I like it, but that was just the name. Like when you asked me, for whatever reason, that name came into my head. It'd be curious.
I'm joking
It'd be curious to see, though, doing a modern remake or retelling of this movie.
I'm joking when I say this, but it's a callback to some of the original actors that they were thinking of. Harrison Ford as Cliff. No, in all seriousness, I was actually thinking Ryan Reynolds, but I was thinking that Harrison Ford was actually one of the original actors that Disney wanted.
Sure, obviously, because he was a name they knew at the time. Now, if you made this movie in 1979 to 1982, you put Harrison Ford in that, and he's knocking it out of the park. Like that era, Harrison Ford could play this Rocketeer great.
My only problem with 1991 was that it would have been too Indiana Jones-ish.
Well, and that's sort of, I mean, it is what they were kind of going for, right? They wanted to ride the coattails of that just a little bit. So, let's see. I do have a couple of clips I want to play real quick. One other visual thing that I loved was there's the shot where he climbs up and he stands in front of the flag, and he does that pose, and the spotlight hits him. And it is straight off of the collected, basically the cover of the Rocketeer #1. That pose. The difference is, I think on the comic, I want to say it was the collected graphic novel. The background is like a target instead of a flag, but I've seen it also done with a flag. And I actually have a version of it done by one of my favorite artists, J. Cott did, where it was
Oh,
called
that's cool.
The Bounty Hunter, and it was Boba Fett in that same pose. I got probably like
Nice.
10 or 12 years ago. But I love that they recreated that pose in the movie. That just tickled
Absolutely.
me.
And that goes back to the superhero thing too.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
I will say real quick before you play the clips and everything. I know that the creator of the Rocketeer, Dave Stevenson, has said that he was 70% happy with this movie. There were things that he would have changed to make it 100%, but he did like overall the movie.
Yeah, because I had heard that in an interview, because he sadly passed away a few years ago, but I had heard in an interview somewhere along the line, after post 2000, that he was pretty happy with everything with the movie. That he liked the tone of it, that he liked it captured the feel of it, and obviously the look that they were going for.
Yeah.
That
I mean,
he was pleased. And Timothy Dalton has said that he really enjoyed working with Joe Johnston, and he really liked making this movie.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can make the creator happy, then I think you've done a pretty dang good job.
Yeah, although truthfully, if you're not adapting, if you're adapting anything other than Alan Moore, making the creator happy is a lot easier.
True.
So
True.
there is that.
We'll talk about that off air specifically, but true.
So
there's some stuff coming up.
Yeah. So audio clip wise, there's a few in here that are pretty fun. I just love this first one. I love when it's after he's had kind of his first flight in the suit, which the visual of the Rocketeer I absolutely love. I love that jacket that he wears and the pat, like the way it fits over top of all the straps and everything. It's such a cool, unique look, and that helmet. And I'm so glad that the other thing that Joe Johnston fought for, aside from Billy, was the helmet, and to have the helmet look like the comic book, because Disney wanted to make it look a little bit different, and he fought for that, and it's better because of that. Because that helmet is iconic.
It's a great diesel punk look.
Yeah, and right after that first flight, he ends up kind of in that swampy area, and PV comes up and unstraps the helmet, and Cliff is just breathing heavy, sitting there, and his reaction is just,
I like it.
I love that. That for me was just perfect. And now I have that as a sound clip that I can use pretty much whenever I want. So, it's one of those things. Alan Arkin, as we said, was great, and I got a few of his one-liners, including use of one of my favorite insults, I think, ever.
Yeah, you'd be halfway to Kansas by now, you chowderhead.
Chowderhead. Chowderhead is so good. And that little chuckle right at the beginning, too. That just...
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah, that's...
And then when the plane blows up, or catches on fire or whatever, and he's just...
Well, that's the end of that.
He says, all right. There's 3 years down the drain. Who cares? Also, calling him a hood ornament.
Yeah.
How do I look?
Like a hood ornament.
It's perfect. It's so good.
I mean, he wasn't wrong.
No, he really wasn't wrong at all. And then you get that moment of just imparting some old man wisdom.
You got a good thing going on with that girl, Clifford. But if she flies a coop, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be your fault.
Again, not wrong at all.
No. And that harkens back to what I said, that, when I was going, when you said that she wasn't really harping on him. That was the scene I was going to say that, she kind of left in the middle of him talking about his stuff. And he paid attention to what she was doing, but he didn't really pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Right, and she wanted him to be better, but she also knew that he was capable of being better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's those were the things I got from Alan Arkin, because they were just great. Neville Sinclair lines in the movie. You got this was one I really liked.
Well, never let it be said Neville Sinclair failed to bring down the house.
There's that charm, right? That's Timothy Dalton charm right there. I love referencing.
Like in the comic books.
That's so good. That right there.
Yeah.
because I just rewatched Hot Fuzz recently, that is such a Seymour Skinner moment. The way he says that, where he's like,
Like in the comic books.
it's the same voice. I loved it. I love that.
Yes.
This was a fun moment where he's fighting. They start fighting on the Zeppelin, and he hits him, and he says, "Where's your stunt man now?"
I do my own stunts.
Which is great because it's a joke.
Yeah.
It's a great joke for the character in general.
Yeah.
But then also it's a good meta joke because Dalton famously did his own stunts as Bond.
Yeah.
When he's listing off his qualities.
Spy. Saboteur. Fascist. All of the above.
He just gets more and more sinister every word that comes out of his mouth there.
Yeah, he does. And fascist, I should say, is a great foreshadowing of his role as Rassilon in Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
I knew I'd get a Doctor Who reference somewhere.
It's a little tough to hear, but here is the moment, or one of the moments, where he goes into that German accent. Plus, it's just a funny line. And again, this is a movie. I think if it's a PG-13 movie, you maybe don't have this type of one-liner. It's hard to say because they might have done it a little bit differently. But I love this.
Everything about you is a lie.
It wasn't lies, Jenny. It was acting.
It was acting. He's got that little bit of German accent speaking English in there. It cracked me up. And this is the one, I remember this from when I was a kid, the first time I watched it with my dad, and we both laughed out loud when he's walking away, and he turns back to Eddie, and he just says,
Happy Valentine's Day.
For no reason whatsoever. It's October. And but because he's Eddie Valentine, he's got to say that, and it was so good. Let's see, what have I got here? We had the hood ornaments.
Your buddy's getting fitted for a pine overcoat.
Pine overcoat. I don't even know if that was slang at that time.
I really don't think it was.
What that sounds like to me is it sounds like somebody who's trying to sound cool using slang wrong. That's what I'm hearing.
No. Apparently, it is actually slang for a coffin.
Huh. Well, the only place I've ever heard it is in the Rocketeer.
Yeah.
He also said,
Alcatraz is your new digs.
Alcatraz is your new digs, which just kind of made me chuckle. I love. We talked a lot about Howard Hughes as the character here, but like he's got like this. This is great.
Thanks to the diligence of the FBI, this particular vacuum cleaner will not fall into the wrong hands.
Terry O'Quinn is great.
Yeah, he really was.
You know, I have this now on my soundboard I can use whenever I want.
Tell him Howard Hughes said so.
Out of context, that's even funnier.
Yeah.
The Spruce Goose, which again, as a kid, I didn't understand this. The joke of this, my dad actually had to kind of clue me in on it because he grabs onto the model and it's the Spruce Goose and it flies, it glides off, and just the reaction from Howard Hughes. And again, it's one of those things that like this only works in a movie, and it only works in a movie like this.
The son of a bitch will fly.
They take a moment to cut back to him and give like this long moment for him to say that, and it just cracked me up. It made me laugh so much. And finally, the last one, and it's Paul Sorvino, and it's just because I don't know, again, that this would make it into a movie now. But he just yells, "Lousy crap!" And that's it. It's one of those where it's an insult to Germans. But it's also like he's only saying it because they're Nazis. Although at that time it was anybody German was a Nazi, according to certain people.
Yeah.
But it's like 1991, you could get away with saying that. I don't know if you put that in a script now. Although setting it in 1930s, you kind of can, right? Like
that's about what I was about to say. Yeah.
By the way, this movie was the big reason why Joe Johnston directed Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yep.
This was the movie that kind of got him into that because he could do this aesthetic really well. And that's part of why the budget was what it was as well, is you're doing a period piece. So you can't just go get any vehicles. You have to go get vintage cars. You have to, do certain things with costuming and all of that, which makes the production that much more expensive. So, but it works. It works here. And we haven't mentioned it yet. Before we end, I have to mention the music. What did you think of the music in this movie?
It worked for the movie. I believe it was the movie music director or something's first movie, in fact.
So it's James Horner did the music for this movie. And I very much like James Horner. Now, he has had in the past people complain that he reuses music a lot or reuses musical motifs. He does
if it works, it works.
He does get some similar stuff, but I mean, this is a guy who he did the music for Titanic, for The Mask of Zorro, for Avatar.
Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Yeah, and The Amazing Spider-Man was his,
which
as
is
well.
Which is the movie we were originally going to do.
Yeah, 172 composer credits for him before he passed away in 2015. He did, I mean, just all sorts of stuff. This was not his first movie.
No, I had that wrong. I'm
looking at it, I mean, he did Glory. He did the music for
The Lady in Red.
Yeah. He had done some stuff, but Cocoon: The Return. He was somebody who early on would get brought in to do like some sequels and things like that. But he did the music for Aliens.
He was the conductor in Star Trek 2.
Yep. Commando was his work. Oh, he did Cocoon. I take that back. So, but like he'd been around for a little while. He did some really good stuff. This, for me though, I think this might be my favorite score of his because it's got that adventure-y, that melody, and there's something about the music for this. Maybe it's because I saw it when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, but it's got this feel to it that is old Hollywood adventure serials type music that I just love. Sure.
I was going to say for me, it would have been The Land Before Time, but I was also 6 years old when I saw those movies. So I'm a big kid at heart. So movies like that stick with me specifically, from the music to the quotes to, the tiny little things. But as for action movies, he totally would have a place on a Mount Rushmore, if you will, alongside Hans Zimmer and John Williams and everything. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, when you've done the music for Star Trek and Commando and, Aliens and an American Tale, he did the music for that. Like, the guy, just a varied career. The Land Before Time. So he worked with Don Bluth. He did the music for Field of Dreams. Like, I'm looking at his stuff right now, and it's amazing. And I would have been remiss if we didn't mention James Horner and mention this music, because for me, the Rocketeer theme, is one that gets in a lot of my playlists of like movie soundtrack score music that I like to put on and play when I'm doing some writing or I'm doing some researching or I'm doing something where I want music that has no lyrics in it. So when I'm reading things, when I'm writing things, I'm not getting distracted by the lyrics. And so that ends up either being some lo-fi stuff. I'll put on some like electronica, some techno, but I also listen to a lot of film scores, and Horner gets a lot of play in that. And the Rocketeer theme almost always pops up because I love that theme, and I love the music in this. It has that feel. They were going for that Indiana Jones feel, and it has that John Williams Indiana Jones type feel to the music.
Yeah, it really did. And the music was phenomenal throughout the movie. When they were in the lounge, you could feel the 1930s vibe.
Oh, yeah.
Just through the music.
Yep, they hit it well.
Honestly, I'm genuinely surprised this movie didn't have a bigger... I mean, like you said, though, it went up against Terminator 2, Robin Hood, Hook. I mean, it went up Silence of the Lambs was out at the time. It unfortunately had the bad luck of being out at the same time as really great movies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate that that happened, because like this is a movie that deserved better than it got at the box office. Is it perfect? No. But it is a movie that today you can sit down with. You could sit down with your 8-year-old nephew. I can sit down with
I did actually.
Yeah, and I can sit down with my nearly 70-year-old father, and we like anybody can sit in and just enjoy this movie. There's nothing there's nothing too far in any direction for it. It's not too geared at kids to be unenjoyable for adults, but it's not too adult to go over the kids' heads. Could you if you did it today, it might get a little darker, it might get a little grittier, which could be unfortunate. The action might be a little bit better. I think even Joe Johnston today is much more capable as an action director than he was at this point. He was still learning at this stage in his career. But you can, like, the bones of his ability as a director are there, and it's kind of sad that he hasn't done more. Like, he did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, October Sky,
Jumanji.
Yeah, Jumanji is pretty fun. Captain America we mentioned, but he hasn't done a ton since then, and I'm not entirely sure why. Because I think that he's very capable. So,
well, I would imagine doing the Wolfman would have something to do with that too.
It wasn't great. I mean, let's be honest. It wasn't great.
No, but honestly, if I were redoing this movie today, I would keep it PG. I wouldn't even go PG-13. Absolutely keep it PG.
I mean, these days, though, you could easily make it PG-13 and it feel like a PG movie. It wouldn't be that hard to do.
Sure.
In fact, a lot of this would end up PG-13 these days with the way that the MPAA does stuff. So,
but what I mean more is that I would definitely still keep it kid friendly. Because like you said, it's kids friendly, but it's not too kid friendly. My 8-year-old nephew did sit down with me, watch it. He enjoyed more the punching, throwing, action scenes. Sure. He is 8 years old, so he's going to enjoy those scenes more. Understandable. You know, I've watched Captain America: First Avenger with him. He absolutely loves Captain America. So there you go. But I like the more adult scenes. I think the scenes with Timothy Dalton and Jennifer Connelly, in my opinion, did go a little too far. But I can understand why they're in the movie at the same time.
Yeah.
So I honestly, I wouldn't even change the music or anything, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, this is a movie, honestly, it's 32 years old. I'm turning 4.
Yeah, it's the feel of fun that this movie has. And that's the thing. It captures a feeling of fun and adventure without having to stray too far. That's why, I mean, they were trying to emulate Indiana Jones. They were trying to emulate that type of film, and I think that it could work. It's tough. It would be tough to do these days without it coming off as being derivative, unfortunately.
Sure.
But it's one of those there where I just feel like it should have done better. It deserved better than it got. Let's put it that way.
I know that for me personally, if I had to name 2, take Batman out of the equation just for reasons of bias. If I had to name 2 movies that were my absolute favorites, looking back on them now in 2023, if I had to name 2 of my favorite movies from the early 90s, it would be The Rocketeer and Hook.
I mean, I'm probably going with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, okay, if I expanded the list to top 5, and it's no particular order really either, I would definitely include the 3 Ninja Turtle movies, absolutely, because I actually saw that. That's the funny thing. You talked about how this movie had to go up against Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and everything. That was the movie I saw in the theaters.
Oh yeah, I definitely.
Even though, as we've established within this show, I never saw the first one at the time.
Right.
I had seen 2 in the theater, which makes no sense, but that's because I can remember all the Pizza Hut and everything. I think The Rocketeer had a tie-in with McDonald's at the time.
Yeah, most Disney stuff did.
Yeah.
That was pretty normal.
Yeah. Yep. I'm looking at it right now. Yep.
So
Or maybe it was Burger King or something stupid like that.
But it's a fun movie, and
it is.
It's a fun movie without feeling. I never get the feeling when I'm watching this like, oh, this was completely tailored to kids, but it was definitely nudged in that direction where they could have had it be slightly older, like older kids, right? I'm not even talking like adult, but like 16, 14 to 16-year-old kind of demographic.
Yeah.
Whereas they were going for, 10 to 13 was sort of where they were aiming with this.
And basically that's why I said that if we could go back, and I mean, yeah, we've had too many origin movies, but if we could go back and do origin movies for the big three, this is the style I would want them done in.
Yeah, I dig this style quite a bit. I'm kind of a sucker for it. So
yeah.
But yeah, that's The Rocketeer. It's streaming on Disney Plus. If you haven't seen it before, give it a watch. It's an hour and 45 minutes long, and it's worth it. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's got great music, great adventure. It looks like a movie from the early 90s. But that's not a bad thing at all. It's very fun. Now next week I start everybody's favorite month of shows.
Yay!
Cage-a-Palooza begins next week, and I can't wait. And we're kicking it off with a doozy. We're kicking it off with Face Off.
Ooh.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to watch. I love Face Off. I saw Face Off in the theater. I do not think of this movie as anything more than it is, and it just makes me smile every time because it's the most ridiculous thing going, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So you're definitely going to want to come back and check out Face Off. I also am going to be doing Renfield this year for Cage-a-Palooza. Look, it has been very difficult for me to go all these months without watching it. So
I can imagine.
But it's worth it. So I have suffered, and I will continue to suffer for the next few weeks.
Even I've seen it already.
And then some more fun Nick Cage stuff after that to round out August. So starting next week, Face Off with Melanie from Made You Watch, a podcast, which is, I think, going to be starting back up soon. I know when I had Adam Mock, her co-host, on a few weeks ago, he said that they were working on getting started back up with that again, which is a fun show because they do similar to this where the two of them make each other watch movies they haven't seen yet, but movies that are like, she's about 10 to 15 years younger than Adam. So they're very different kind of demographics. And so she's making him watch the movies she grew up with, and he's making her go back and watch some of the stuff that he grew up with. And it's a lot of fun. So I've had them both on before, but it's going to be fun to have Mel back and talking about Face Off. So Cage-a-Palooza kicks off next week. I can't wait. But thank you so much for being here this week. And I'm glad that you got to see The Rocketeer. And now you can you can be part of the cool kids club that knows what this movie is and how great it is. And I can't say Happy Valentine's Day to anybody anymore without hearing it in the voice of Timothy Dalton.
Yeah, it's one of those lines. It's going to be iconic. This was a great movie. I'm glad I finally got to see it.
Good. Do you have any projects or anything that you're working on or anything you want to plug as long as I got you here?
Nothing for me personally, but I just want to take a moment to support the SAG union and the Writers Guild and everything. I know a lot of people have been asking questions. Just super quick. Do not cancel your Netflix, Max, or Disney Plus subscriptions. Keep watching those movies, and I'll tell you why. The more you watch them, and go see Barbie and Oppenheimer. You know what? Take them both in as a matinee. Go watch both, and I recommend watching Oppenheimer then Barbie. That way you get the sadness out of the way and you see the happy.
Yeah.
But simply because the more people that see those movies right now, the more the writers have and the actors have power. Basically, The reason the writers are striking is because studios want to replace them with AI, and we can all see how horrible that would be. They don't get enough support in the writers' rooms, and they don't work enough realistically. And as a writer, that's important to me on that aspect. On the other aspect, you got the actors. who, guess what, folks? They aren't all millionaires and billionaires. They all can't be John Travolta and Johnny Depp and all of them. To get health care, you have to make a minimum of $26,000. And a lot of them don't make that. So they don't have health care. And with streaming, we're in what's now called the streaming age, where movies will go to streaming sometimes before they go to theaters. And actors and writers both aren't making enough money off of the streaming services for them to get the health care and everything. So don't cancel Netflix. Go see the movies. Help the writers fight back against the studios. If you see a pit, don't. There are certain rules for like influencers and TikTokers and everything. I'm not going to get into those, but basically, if you're in an area where writers and actors are striking, if you can, get them a pizza, get them a case of water, get just help in any way that you can so that they can get back to making stuff that we love sooner. Otherwise, we're going to watch more reality TV, and no one wants that.
And they're not striking because they are greedy. They're striking for the benefit of all of the people as part of the Writers Guild and all of the SAG-AFTRA participants.
That's why I said, they're not all billionaires. Even then, the billionaires are still striking because they want their fellow actor to make more money so that they can have health insurance, so that they can make money to eat. And I think that's important to everyone. So, like I said, go see those movies. Continue watching stuff on Netflix. Just don't really post about it, which I know is hard for some people, but you don't want to give the studios free publicity.
So definitely, those are good things. I think the strike is important, and I definitely am not a member of either the Guild or SAG-AFTRA, but I stand with them. And hopefully everything can get resolved, and they can get the studios to the bargaining table and get some stuff figured out, so we can get back to having more good content.
I mean, my family, it dates back to the Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania coke and coal strikes of 1910 and 11. We're a strong union family, so any union I will stand with 100%.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for being here this week, and thank you for sitting down, watching this movie, and coming to talk with me about it, because it was a lot of fun. And I'm just glad that I got to show you this movie, and you finally watched it. So super
actually, fun. Travis, there is one more thing that I can. So people have actually come up to me, and I know I've teased you about it a lot. People actually want my true feelings on Season of the Witch, Halloween 2.
3.
Here's what I'll say, folks. Or 3. 3. Sorry, 3. Yeah, 3. Here's what I'll say. If they had left off Halloween 3 from the title, fine movie. Fine and dandy. Great movie. But the fact that they had to tack on Halloween and try to tie it in with Mike Myers and everything, and they didn't even do that, it's a horrible movie.
So I will counter that in that you are not incorrect. However, here's the thing. Halloween 2 didn't need to exist. It wasn't the original idea.
It really didn't either.
And the story of Michael Myers never needed to continue. And John Carpenter didn't want it to, but he didn't really have control over that. And so they made Halloween 2.
Yeah.
And Halloween 3
I believe the original idea was...
Halloween 3 was his idea to try and steer it back towards the anthology that he had originally envisioned. Of telling different stories based around Halloween. But by then it was too late. Too many people went to the theater expecting to see another Michael Myers movie. They didn't get that, and then they got upset. So the studio backpedaled and came out with more Michael Myers stories later.
That's why I said, if they would have left Halloween 3 off of it, fine and dandy. And I understand, John Carpenter didn't have anything to do with that really and everything. And I feel bad for the man, but it's a fine movie.
It's still the second or third best Halloween film that's been made, so.
And that makes absolutely no sense to me, but okay. But yeah, so Too Long Didn't Read, standalone movie, fine and dandy, part of the Halloween series, horrible.
You name me 3 better in the series than that one.
Not counting the original?
You can count the original as one of the 3. But you have to name me 3 movies in that series that are better than Season of the Witch.
That's like, are we talking the whole into the 2000s and everything.
Yeah, Halloween films in general.
Personally, I would say the original, the 2018 version, and the 2021 version.
So I can give you two of those three, because
fine.
There's an argument that can be made for Halloween 2018, but outside of that, I would disagree, and I would put Season of the Witch as the, like I say, second or third best in the franchise.
And that's why I always tease you for it.
Well, but no, this it's good to know. It is a fun movie. Like it really is
as a standalone movie. Yeah,
and that's the way I think of it. It's not involved with the rest of that series at all.
Yeah, so. No, that's completely fair. But I promised that I would give my feelings on it in the show, and
well, there we go.
I always try to.
It's on the record now. You can't back away from it anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you try, I have receipts. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, once again, thank you. This was super, super fun. Definitely come back next week for Rocketeer, for Face Off, and the kickoff of Cage-a-Palooza 2023. If you like checking out the show live, I do record it live on Twitch every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time at twitch.tv/TV's Travis. You can hang out in the chat room, hear the show be made live, or catch it later on. It comes out in podcast form on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also go to youtube.com/@TV's Travis, and there are video versions there that are available. You can go to tvstravis.com, and you can find the feed for the show to put into any podcast player you want, as well as links to merchandise or the Patreon, patreon.com/WYHS. And you can support the show that way. You get special Discord access. There are monthly movie catch-up nights where we go through the back catalog of 226 episodes now. Pick a movie that patrons haven't watched and hang out and watch that on Discord. We got one coming up where we're going to watch Hackers, because I got some patrons that have never seen that. So if you want to get involved in that, you can join the Patreon for as little as $1 an episode. And you'll also get first crack at some of my video content as it comes out that I'm working on behind the scenes right now. So there's some stuff in the works happening there as well. And the show will be out. This show will be out this coming Wednesday, and then we're rolling into Cage-a-Palooza, and I cannot wait. It's one of my favorite times of the year. So until next week and Face Off, just remember to enjoy your movies, and let's be excellent to each other. This has been Wait, You Haven't Seen It.
Prepare yourself for a shock. I'm the Rocketeer.
The Rock of who?